Hello and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christine Era.
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership. Hello, Christine. How you doing today?
I am good. It's a Monday and we are getting into the swing of things. And it's the beginning of, it's like the first month of the year. So sometimes this month can like fly by super fast. And other times you're like, when is January going to be over? Fortunately, this year it's flying by pretty fast.
Yeah, we're in the third week already of January. It's nice and cold. People have had snow all over the country. I hope everyone's been safe and keeping warm. And it's kind of January means back to basics. And
yes.
Speaking back to basics, today's episode, we're going back to the basics of Profit First. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably familiar with Profit First. You know, we've been talking about it for quite a while. Profit First is a book written by Mike Michalowicz. And you're also probably pretty familiar with Profit First for lawn care and landscape businesses, which is a derivative of the Profit First book. And Christine Era, my co-host, wrote that book. So today we're going to talk about the basics of Profit First.
Yeah. And in the book, you know, we start out with the basics, right? And then I dive deep into advanced methods of Profit First and then beyond. Like, what can you do, you know, in this industry, the lawn and landscape businesses, to support the growth of your business and what is the right way to grow it. So I was really excited about, you know, today's episode because we talk about Profit First all the time in our own businesses and also with our clients. It's something that, you know, we've been doing for years. And it kind of, I feel like it's just like, you know, when you ride a bike, right? Like you never forget how to ride a bike. It gets easier and easier every time. Profit First, I feel like, is the same. You know, we've been doing Profit First for so long. So sometimes it can be really easy to forget, you know, how we started off and that it was hard at one point for us, right? Like if Profit First was hard and now it's not. But there are people out there that are still struggling with understanding the basics. And I think that's okay because we've all been there. We've all been there with the basics.
Yeah, and the basics are a great place to start at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, you know, even your quarterly check-ins, make sure, because if we're not doing the basics, then the advanced will never happen, right? So we really need to use the basic foundation to build off of everything else. So one of the most interesting things about Profit First is just the basic formula of what Profit First is. And there's a general accounting principle that sets up where it goes, you know, profit is total sales minus expenses equals the profit. So basically what's left over from after the total sales minus expenses, what's left over is profit. But Mike Michalowicz took that formula and he flipped it on its head.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the hardest things when you bring this to like a bookkeeper, an accountant, somebody with that mindset to where they're like, no, you can't take profit first. Like, what do you mean? Like, you know, here's all the income, here's all the expenses, and then here's the profit. And so Mike's formula is, you know, sales minus profit equals expenses. So you're being intentional about what comes first. And you're actually looking at it and going, well, what is a healthy amount to spend in my business based off of my revenue level? And how can I be intentional about profit? So I love, you know, the concept. And even if your bookkeeper or your accountant is struggling with it, it's a new way of being intentional to make sure your business is going to make money.
Yeah, and it's really simple, like the concept, but it's not easy, right, to implement it. And you have to the first time you talk to your bookkeeper or accountant, they're like, no, this is how it's done. And we're like, well, this is how we're going to do it going forward. We're going to make sure that we take our profit first, and then we're going to spend what is left over, as opposed to having our profit being what is left over. It's much, much more intentional. One of the things too that I've run against or run into is understanding what profit is versus net income on the balance sheet. I mean, on your P&L, your net income is generated on your profit and loss, then that goes over into the balance sheet, which is not profit. Profit is what is taken after all expenses, everything is paid. It doesn't, that's its job, is to produce profit, where and your net income has a job. It has to pay capital gains. It has to make capital improvements. It has to pay for equipment. It's the owner's draw and dividends or bonuses. If the owner is running it as an LLC, that is how the owner gets paid out of net income. So profit is outside of that. So it's really important to understand that profit is its own function.
Yeah. And I like the methods of profit first, because as you shared, Steve, when people who aren't accountants and bookkeepers and, they open up a business and it's not their strong point, and that's totally fine. There's things in my business that I don't love to do. Like I've said so many times, I don't love marketing. I get the idea. I know why it's there. I don't want to spend time doing it. So most business owners, they get the idea of bookkeeping and accounting. That doesn't mean they love to do it, nor do they want to do it, nor should they. So one of the reasons why I really like the formula of profit first is because you don't really have to totally understand, as you were talking about, the P&L and what's left over, and then how it runs over to the balance sheet and it does all its jobs over there, and then what's left. You can right out the gate say, okay, we're going to take 10%, 15%, 20% right off the top, and we're going to start setting that aside. And that is our profit. And all the rest of the funds in the business are going to function and go do their job. But you're, basically putting the profit on the bench and saying, hey, you're not going to play this game. All these other, players have their role, and your job is going to, show up later, like later in the game, right? So that profit is so important to set aside. You're being intentional about it, and you know exactly how much, and then you can use your money as you need to for your business. But you don't have to, understand, like, how does my P&L work and my balance sheet, and what is this money going to go do, and how does this work, and it all funnels out, and then what happens. And so really that profit percentage right out the gate makes that huge difference and makes it simple.
Right. And without worrying about your P&L, your chart of accounts, and your balance sheet and all that. Really, it's total revenue minus the profit percentage you're going to take out, and then you run the business on the balance of that, what's left over after you take your profit. That's it. I mean, it's that kind of simple. Just run your business on what is available, as opposed to accepting what is left over as your profit. It's much, much more intentional. And one of the things is, what we focus on first gets taken care of first. So if we're putting profit first, we'll have a higher profit, and we'll be much more intentional. If it's profit last, the last gets like the least of anything. And I think that is a key component of profit first.
Yeah. And with profit, like you said, Steve, what are we going to do with it, right? It's our company needs money in order to survive. And it's not just money flowing through it. It's money that's left over that has a purpose and an intention. So we never, again, want to look at it as what's second or last. If we're setting it aside, then we're always going to make sure that our company is financially healthy, and it's going to be able to be there to support us, to support our employees, to support our family, whatever it is that we're doing for the long run. So it's not playing the game of, well, until, or let's roll the dice. It's, hey, let's make sure this happens, and we're here to stay.
Right. So it creates this sustainability and permanence in the business with intention.
Yeah. And it's important, right? Like if you have a startup, you can start implementing profit first right out the gate and really put those funds aside and protect them. And even if you don't have a startup and you've been, in business for many, many years, I mean, you were in business for how many years before you started Profit First?
Oh, I would say almost 35 years. No, 33 years.
And then you
So
started Profit.
3 decades. 3 decades before I found Profit First, which kind of gave me that consistency in the business, gave me more profitability, more intentionality. So one of the biggest challenges in the lawn care landscape business is the love of equipment, the love for equipment. And almost every single company that I've consulted or coached since starting Green Profit Academy is, I'd say 90% way too much equipment. So their profit is going into their equipment that they don't need, that they're not using enough, that they're not getting a return on investment. So by practicing Profit First, that now that profit is going to them and the company and not for payments on nice equipment or cool equipment that they don't really need, and they really are not getting any kind of return on investment. It's almost like having money that is not being invested or getting returned on in a bank or any type of mutual fund or stock. It's like just sitting there and it's just depreciating daily, day after day. So that seems to be one of the things that Profit First really helps with, is identifying how much money is left to invest in the company because they took their profit first.
Yeah. So after 30 years, like you survived for 30 years, implemented Profit First, which is any time is a great time, right? And since you implemented Profit First, you've actually been able to grow your company. So you were able to scale and grow your company after 30 years of struggling along and getting to a certain point and then implementing Profit First. I want to say tripled your size from where you were before?
It took us 30-ish years to get to about 2 million. And then it took us another, 5 years to get to 5 million. So, we more than doubled. And if I didn't have Profit First lined up with that, we would have never got there, because the money was always there every growth stage. So we weren't going deeper in debt to grow because we had the allocations, mostly. Was it perfect? No, but it was mostly lined out correctly. We were still off here and there on a few allocations and percentages, but if you're off 2%, 1%, we still grew, where before it was like kind of winging it, growing and hoping everything was going to work out. But it was a slow growth to that $2 million mark, 30 years, and then to go from 2 million to 5 million. And really Profit First allowed that to happen without going into deeper debt or, having this uncontrollable, couldn't meet payroll, couldn't too much a month at the end of the money. I like to say, we always had the money there. We always paid all our bills on time. We were always able to meet payroll. Our payroll account was fully funded. We would be like one payroll amount off for the year, which, that's it. We had the money. It was just estimated we would be off one payroll. That is an amazing thing when you're growing at that rate and doubling your business in 1 year, you're off one payroll period. That's pretty impressive. And we saw it coming. 3 months ahead. So we were prepared for it. So we weren't surprised for it. And we knew exactly why and when and where, which is just an amazing thing. So yeah, for growth, if you're looking at growing your company, especially exponentially, Profit First really lines up with that strategy.
Yeah. And what stands out to me and what you just shared is, when you're under that 2 million mark, that is the easiest growth in a business for you to have. Because once you start getting over that, 2 million, 2.5 and up, it's harder to grow and, double your revenue or, even have maybe a 40% increase, 30% increase. So it's that between, 0 and I think it's 1.5 to where it's like, oh yeah, we can grow. And then it kind of slows down a little bit. So 30 years of struggle through the easier growth phase of revenue tiers, and then implementing Profit First. And those are the harder ones right after 2 million, to where you guys just kind of grew a few revenue tiers there.
Yeah. And at that point, we were growing. So you get momentum. We figured out our marketing, our sales process, our systems, but having the cash flow management system with Profit First to support all that, we would have not been able to do it. I would have had to gone into debt. We would have always been one step behind trying to catch up. Because now we had an allocation percentage for equipment. So that was the percentage. We had an allocation percentage for marketing. We had an allocation percentage for labor. We had an allocation percentage for everything. So we knew exactly what we could spend as a percentage of. And as the company grew, those percentages just followed the revenue growth. So it was like an automatic plug and play.
Yeah. So you went from the basic Profit First system into the advanced. So like that equipment and marketing is more the advanced, which we are going to cover on a future podcast after this one. We're going to talk about like how the advanced works in a business. What are some of the accounts and how can you really leverage them to scale and grow your company? But just getting the Profit First basic methodologies in allows you to get to that next phase.
Oh yeah, just putting in, when we just implemented, I know I skipped ahead to the advanced, but just putting in the profit percentage, like, okay, we started with 1% profit. That was the first year. And it's like, okay, then we set up our material and subs account. And then we set up our owners and tax accounts and our OPEX account. So when we set up just the basics, that was a huge game changer because when it came time to pay the taxes, we always had the money. And instead of being this like, oh my gosh, what account am I going to take the tax money out of? Or I'm not going to take a paycheck for the next month because I just have to pay the feds X amount. With Top Profit First, the taxes are always there. And that was a huge relief. Like it just went away from my head. And the other thing I kind of really would credit Profit First with, because the money was always taken care of using that system, I could focus on hiring, selling, training, and building the company as opposed to chasing money, figuring out who to pay what, when, where, having that clog my creativity, my energy up, trying to find, we got to pay the vendors. We got to pay for material. Where's that money going to come from? That material was always in the material account. So that really allowed me and my team to not be distracted by managing money.
Yeah. The money management side and worrying about money. We all have different relationships with money. Some of them can be healthy. Some of them can be unhealthy. And just worrying about money, it really stresses you to where you lose sleep. You're probably not showing up as your best for other people in your life. You're focused on other things. So you have split attention. And the energy that you're putting into what you want to accomplish isn't your best energy either, because it's constantly taking up mental real estate when you're having to really think about, well, how is the company performing? Where are we at financially? What expenses do I have? Are we going to make payroll? Should I buy that piece of equipment? Are we ready to hire? I mean, there's like 50 million questions that come up. And when you don't have that cash flow and you don't have a system in place, every single one of those stressors or those questions is a stressor.
Yeah. And I think, your team sees it. Your clients see it, your vendors see it, and it can kind of really put the brakes on your growth. Just that constant stress, your family sees it, your friends see it. I mean, you can wear that stress of that management of that cash flow everywhere you go, from the time you get up to the time you're trying to go to sleep at night and you're worrying about, paying your vendors or paying your, meeting your payroll. And when you don't have to worry about that, and it's not a profit, the profit is not a dirty word anymore, because your profit is your focus. It's what you're getting for owning the business as the asset of the business, and you're doing it way more intentional. So it's very interesting. Once I started doing Profit First and taking that distribution at the end of the quarter, that in Profit First basics, I paid for a kitchen renovation. I paid for a really nice anniversary trip to Hawaii. I have paid for other vacations going to Finland. And, I have paid for gifts for my family, gifts for my friends, vacations. out of my profit first distributions. And I would have never been able to do that because my business, I would have been like, oh, I'm championing my business. I'm putting my money back in my business. Even after 30 years, that mentality was not going away. Instead of like, okay, my business is going to have to be efficient with what it has. And it's going to have to really utilize all of the assets that it has as far as equipment, tools, people, skills, instead of me adding more stuff that it doesn't need and I'm not going to get a return on.
Yeah. It amazes me how a simple formula of sales minus profit equals expenses can have that big of an impact. Like, it's just this tiny little formula that's like, hey, why don't you take your sales, take your profit first, and then here's your bucket, like, of how much you can spend in the business. And it changes their perspective, how you approach, your relationship with your business, how the business supports you instead of you supporting your business. And then just having this ripple effect, dynamically with your own life, your quality of life, and then the people around you.
Yeah. And, we this morning, we had a little meeting about going over equipment spend, what are we going to spend this year? And it was interesting to me how resourceful people could be and creative to get what they wanted done with their budgets that they were allotted, and also how much they were focusing on the activities that were generating the best gross profit margins, as opposed to this cool truck, it tilts sideways, it tilts this way, it's got a remote control. It wasn't about the fun, cool equipment. It was about what is going to give us the return on investment with the budget that we have. So, what happened with my team was I got stopped being asked for stuff or cool stuff that we supposedly needed, because now that we have an allocation for it, they're always making sure that we're getting the highest return.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been very nice. That's why I'm such a big advocate for it. And that's why I encouraged you to write the book for the lawn care and landscape industry, because I saw what it did for my business. I saw what it did for my life. We're paying people more than we ever have. Our retention rate for our employee and team remain the highest it's ever been. So, I think it's just, if we can get people to start with the basics, start with that 1% profit, and then build out the basic 5, accounts, that's they can be on their way, on the path.
So I want to take some time to talk about the methodologies of Profit First, because I think this really explains why the system works and how the system works. And I know in other interviews that we've done in the past and talking to people who have implemented Profit First, the methodologies behind Profit First, they've brought up specifically and said, if I hadn't realized this, it never would have made sense to me. Or once I understood this, then I could really follow through with implementing it because I understood, and it really helped, my narrative. It helped what I was trying to achieve, and it gave me a different perspective. So I think that the methodologies are important, and I want to spend some time unpacking those. And I feel like they also are one of those things about Profit First that sometimes, when you're implementing it, you can forget about.
Yeah, and one of the big parts of Profit First is Parkinson's law, that where like we use up whatever resources are available. So if we put some of those resources to the side, we'll use up what's left that we didn't put to the side. And Mike Michalowicz really loves to use that toothpaste. So when we get a brand new tube of toothpaste, we're like, yoo-hoo, toothpaste. This is my imitation of Mike. And he's like squirting toothpaste all over the toothbrush. But then when we get to the end of that toothpaste, we're very strategic about just putting the exact amount on the toothbrush that we need. And there's no yoo-hooing. It's just like I need this much to brush my teeth. And we're very intentional about that. And that's what happens when we take our profit first and that goes into our profit account. Then we have less to operate. And so we're much more intentional about how we're running our business with that balance or those resources.
Yeah. And you were just sharing in the previous conversation we were having about how your team is now showing up. And this is Parkinson's law in action, right? Your team is showing up and they're saying, hey, this is our equipment spend percentage. And they're now figuring out how much and what they can make work based off of what they have versus just bringing things to the table and saying, hey, we need to drop $50,000 on this piece of equipment, or it would be really cool to have these. They're looking at how much is allocated for equipment using advanced profit first in this situation, but they're implementing Parkinson's law right there in your conversation in your meeting where they're saying, hey, so we have this much for equipment spend, so we're going to be resourceful, and these are the ideas that we have.
Yeah, and that's that Parkinson's law. Like, this is how much money we have and where do we want to put it, as opposed to we need all this stuff. It's funny how much I heard we need until we really started using profit first, and they looked at their percentages that they got to spend. Then they were creative and innovative and much more resourceful. Even tracking hours on machines, it helped people to start tracking numbers and looking at things. And it's because they realized that the money wasn't limitless. And the other thing too is that once we had profit first in place and we had that, the payroll percentage allocation, right? Now we know how much we can pay people and what they should be getting paid. And if they want, raises or when that can happen, and they can see what those percentages are, my managers can way ahead of time. So Parkinson's law is very interesting. If you try it, I think, see what you can do with less on one project and see how resourceful you can be. Because the root of invention is money or too much resources.
Yeah. And as human beings too, I've noticed in working with clients, this is one of the areas they'll try to find their way around in profit first, to where they're so used to deciding how much is going to be spent on something that they'll increase their percent allocations, which then in turn affect other ones. And then we have to go back and go, oh, well, I see you increased this. Can you tell me more about that? And they're like, well, we wanted to buy this or buy that. And I said, well, from your other percentage, were you able to afford that? No. Okay, so let's talk about the increase. So they connect how they're trying to change the percent allocations to still meet their needs. And that's one of the things to really understand is the percent allocations are there for a reason. They are guardrails and there to help guide us. They're not there to be changed at a whim. So we don't want to make the system work around our needs. We need to have our needs work around the system.
Right. Yeah. It's a really cool concept, the Parkinson's. I think about milk in the beginning of the week. My kids are when they were small, cereal. And they're pouring the milk all over. And Thursday, there's 2 inches, and now they're just putting enough milk on the cereals to make it edible, right? So they figured it out and they got through. So even kids start practicing Parkinson's law at a young age because mom didn't go shopping until Saturday morning. So that milk had obviously if we're out of milk, we would have bought milk, but they knew that, okay, we got to make it till Saturday with this milk. So even kids start practicing Parkinson's law at a pretty early age.
Are you looking to take your business to the next level? Look no further than the Green Profit Academy Business Accelerator Kickstarter Workshop. In 7 weeks, you'll learn the critical skills necessary to define and achieve your goals, including developing a mission, vision, and purpose. You'll also explore immutable laws, benchmarks, goal setting, and create your very own strategic business plan. With this comprehensive program, you'll be able to set achievable goals and develop a roadmap for success, accelerate your business growth, meet your objectives, and achieve long-term sustainability. Go to growgpa.com/GBAKW to sign up for our GPA Business Accelerator Kickstarter Workshop today. Again, that's growgpa.com/GBAKW. GBAKW. Use promo code GBAKW100 to receive $100 off the workshop today. Yeah, and one of the other things is it's called the primacy effect. So what comes, first, which is this is how, why profit first matters. So why the first part of profit first matters. So it's an interesting psychological phenomena with all human beings. Like we all experience this. And so what comes first, you typically have, more of a connection to it. It matters to you more. So if somebody, says something, right? I always say, we always remember what people say first and last, and we don't remember what's in the middle, right? Or we remember what happens first and last, and we forget what happens in the middle. So, if you're looking at, the primacy effect, when we say the word profit, so profit comes first, you're focused on what's most important, which is profit, right? But if we're saying costs come first, you're focused on costs, right? What are we going to spend? So if you're looking at, and I give this example in the book to where, I share 6 words and, I say snow, wind, cold, heat, breeze, sun. And I say, which one, came first? You're going to think of snow, which is cold. Or if I reverse it and I use the word sun first, people will automatically remember, oh, sun, that you said that first. So it's a psychological concept that all humans have to where we are connecting with the first thing that comes in play and we're making it far more important. So the next thing I want to talk about is the 4 core principles. And these are pretty much how profit first operates. So you're looking at saying, okay, I'm going to take my profit first. Great. So then what, right? So how does this work? So the 4 core principles Mike explains in the original Profit First book. I unpack the same ones in the Lawn and Landscape Businesses book. And we're using the concepts of small plates. And I always say, when we're talking about profit first in a coaching conversation, I'm telling them like, hey, so the income account, look at it as like your serving platter, right? So you don't want to commingle your funds. You don't want your expenses to come out of your income account, just like you wouldn't eat off of the serving platter. Like, could you imagine at Thanksgiving, there's a big turkey serving platter and you're just taking, bites off the serving platter? We want to keep that serving platter to where everything, that we're going to take from it, like that entire turkey goes on that serving platter. And then we take what we want from it. So, and then you look at the other accounts, and we're basically moving money from the income account, which is all the income goes into one account. And then you're putting the amount into these other accounts. So you could look at them as small plates. So you're only going to, maybe eat what's on that plate or use what's on that plate. And it gets us into that habit of only using what's there until it's time to replenish it. And this is where the 5 basic accounts come into play, which we're going to unpack here in just a little bit. But it's the, using small plates. Your income account is your serving platter. Your other profit first accounts are your small plates. You're only going to use or eat or consume what you put on those small plates. So that's the first principle.
So just to be clear on that. So all of the money that comes into the business goes into an income account. And it goes into the income account, and then it's going to get distributed out of that income account. So it sits on the income account or like the serving platter. Then it's going to get dished out from there. Just so that's clear, because that's a question I get asked, like, what goes in the income account? All income, all revenue that comes into the company goes into the income account.
Right. And then the next one is put sustainability first. So, and I like this one because it's just right up right. We're looking at profit first. We're saying we're going to put profit first. So we're looking at it from the idea of, let's say you go on a diet or you make the choice, like, I'm going to eat healthier. So really, if you sit down, are you going to eat all those mashed potatoes or that mac and cheese first? it would be nice, right? It's like having dessert first. But no, what we're going to do is we're going to eat our vegetables first and our protein first. And then, we eat the other stuff on the plate that probably isn't as healthy for us. So that would kind of be the strategy out the gate. So the idea with profit first is we're putting profit away first. We're setting it aside, and it's allowing our business to be sustainable because we're being intentional about it. So we're moving funds from the income account to profit, and then to owner's compensation, because that's how we all get paid as the business owners, and then tax, so we don't have to stress about paying our tax liability at the end of the year. And then what's left goes into operating expenses. So the expenses come last and profit comes first. So we're being intentional about putting sustainability in our business, that long-term plan, first.
So we're going to put all the money into the income account. And then I was saying like before, then it gets distributed out into these other accounts. And the other accounts are profit first. So your profit account, and then an owner's comp account. So that's what the owner's going to get paid. And then a tax account. So that's going to pay the federal and state income taxes. And it's also going to pay the taxes that the owner would pay. It does not include sales tax. Sales tax would be its own specific percentage, because if you're charging sales tax, not all states do, some don't, but that money is not ours. That's a state that goes into its own account. And then it finishes up. The last account is operating expense. So expenses are last. So profit account, owner's comp, tax, and then your operating expenses. Right. Those are the basic, like vegetable, eat those first.
Yeah. And then the third one is remove temptation. And so if you're constantly struggling to keep your hand out of your piggy bank, so your savings account, the solution is to remove temptation. So we have what we call a profit hold account, right? So if you move money into your profit account and you're doing this regularly, then you can move it into a hold account. So this account is something that you want, to be at a different bank. It can be somewhere else to where it's really hard. And mind you, not every one of our clients do this, because some of our clients are so disciplined that there's no way that they would ever go touch that profit account. Some of them have an office manager or an internal bookkeeper that they fear with every inch of their life if they were ever to go touch that profit account, or that bank account. So they would never touch those funds either. And they typically, don't gain access to it. So they're not getting in there. Somebody else is helping manage their cash flow, which is great. They have someone else championing it. So, to eliminate the temptation for those who, might feel the pressure or is struggling to get this into the habit, or it just might feel better, right? We have a profit hold account. We put that money away in that profit hold account, and we're taking 50% of our profit account at the end of each period, and we're putting that away. Some people do it per allocation. Some people do it at the end of the quarter. Some people do it at the end of the month, but they're transferring it out of their profit account, and they're putting 50% of that profit balance in that account into a profit hold account. And that's really where you're intentionally building that capital in your business, and you're building, it's like your vault. You're starting your vault to where the rainy day happens. If something bad happens, you have something to fall back on.
Yes, that is what that is for. And will a rainy day happen? Yes. If you're in business long enough, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. Whether a client goes bankrupt, whether there's COVID, there's always something that's going to happen, that having that rainy day fund. And so a lot of pushback I get with this is, I'll just use my line of credit. Great. So we want to go into debt when our backup is against the wall, or we're in a bad place. We want to add more debt, right? Not really the best idea. I've been there, done that. That's not a really good long-term strategy. You can use your own money. That way you're not in debt. Now you don't have somebody that's going to be coming at the end of the month asking you for their money back. And also, now you're putting debt on your balance sheet. So the business is struggling or it's going through a crisis, and you're going to add debt to the balance sheet. That's not really a good business strategy. It's a much better strategy to use your own money that your profit, was generated through your own company in that crisis situation to help you through that. So the other half, though, of the 50% goes into that profit hold. The other half can pay back debt. It can pay the owner's distribution, and it can also add to capital improvement. So depending on what your financial situation is, you're going to be able to take a portion of that profit account is the owner's as a reward or return on investment for growing and owning the business.
Yeah. And I want to clear something up because this comes up a lot when they're looking at using their profit allocation to pay off debt. And one of the things that you want to do when you implement profit first is you go through what we call a debt freeze, so an expense freeze. You're not going to continue to charge up those credit cards, right, that aren't paid off monthly. You're not going to go pull money out on a line of credit to go buy something. And this is typically where confusion comes in play. You can use your profit allocation, your portion of it, not the 50% that you're putting away in that hold account, but the other half that you might take as a distribution in that period. And you can pay off old debt, right? You don't want to be gaining new debt, because if you pay off new debt or you pay off old debt and you're also building new debt, all you're doing is plowing that profit back into your account. And you don't want to do that. That's against the profit first methodologies and the profit first rules. So I really want to make it clear that you can't have new debt or be gaining new debt and use your profit to pay off old debt, because you're just going to keep doing that same crazy cycle again and again and again. And people have asked me, well, can I use my profit allocation, to pay down debt? And the first thing I ask them is, what is your debt situation? Are you gaining new debt? Is this old debt? Talk to me about it. And we clarify. And then if they are creating new debt, we talk about strategies around that and what needs to happen in order for them to stop that debt cycle.
And one of the things that, we've noticed is that now if people are practicing profit first, they have this profit account, they have all this money they've never seen or had before. They want to pay off equipment really quickly, or they want to do this other stuff. And as long as the equipment's being paid for through the services, it's servicing that debt. We just want that to continue. It's more important to build up the vault. But if someone has credit cards at 29, 33% interest, and that is like money that they borrowed and it doesn't have an asset that goes against it, it's just a liability at that high interest rate, then we want to use the money from the other 50% to pay towards that debt. But you're also going to want to do that strategically. So you're going to use some of that 50% to pay that high credit card debt, but you're also still going to take some money for the owner as reward for owning the business. So, it has to be intentional and has to really be like specific for that credit card, because these high interest rates on these credit cards are killers. But we don't want to use up our profit account to pay ahead on equipment that is paying for itself at a much lower interest rate than a credit card.
Yeah. And with that credit card, you don't want to be using your profit account to pay off the balance of the credit card that you're charging it up every month. Because if that credit card is being overcharged and you can't pay it out of your OpEx account, that means you're spending too much money and you need to look to see why. And sometimes, it also doesn't have to do about the money, but it has to do about what you're charging. So what are your prices? And, are your prices not high enough to support your business? And, could you increase your prices, or do you need to increase your prices? So those are two reasons. Either you're overspending or you're not charging enough. But the thing I love about this concept is it allows you to sit down and identify, are we spending too much or are we not charging? So you're really finding the root of the problem and you're getting to it faster and you're able to solve it. So that's another thing I love about the Profit First system is it gives you insight you didn't have before from a different perspective to get there faster. So the last principle that we need to talk about is it's establish a rhythm. So typically businesses go through this concept of feast or famine. So they have like all this cash and then they do stuff with it and then they have no cash and they're like, we can't do anything, or, you know, our hands are tied. So, you know, as an entrepreneur, business owner, whether you've been in the game for a long time or you're new, you may feel this effect of like your bank account is flooded with cash, and then you go through the stage where you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. So the idea of creating a rhythm in your business is you're funding each account in advance with the cash that comes into your income account, and then you're putting it into the other account. So then you're funding the other accounts. And what this does is it raises awareness, right? So you're going, how is my business functioning and what does it need and when does it need it? If those accounts get drained faster than they can be funded, I call it being behind the Profit First system. And we want to get in front of it. So you can strategically talk to a Profit First advisor and look at how can we get in front of this? What are some of the tweaks that we can make? So that way we're funding the accounts in advance and using what we need. And then we fund the accounts in advance and we use what we need. And what this does is it stops the reactive behavior of that, you know, bank account balance financial management. So it stops you from falling into, you know, survival of that feast or famine. We have all this money, let's spend it, you know, versus the let's fund the accounts and spend what we need to spend, and then we'll fund the accounts again.
Yeah, it can be a little tough when people first start on Profit First because they see the money in the accounts and they want to spend it. They're like, I have this account's overfunded. I'm like, well, hold on. So the money that's in that account, that's for the whole year. That's not just for today and tomorrow. That's for the, you know, your equipment account or your material account looks overfunded. That's because you're taking a lot of money in now that doesn't have a lot of material in it. Next time you're going to take in accounts that or pays that go into your income account that have a lot of material in it. It's going to balance out. But, you know, looking at accounts and not looking at it at the entirety percentage of the year, people can get a little excited and they think their accounts are overfunded. They want to start reallocating money. But, you know, soon, like for us, that's how it works. We're buying, you know, 80% of our material is going to be purchased in the first 3/4 parts of the year. So, you know, when it comes to that last quarter, almost all of our material has been paid for, but our material account is very low. And then it starts building up. So, but if I looked at it just in the first quarter, like, oh my gosh, look at all this money, it's overfunded, not realizing that how we got there was based on 3 years of historical data on what our percent spend is, and that money is going to be there when it's needed. So, it can be pretty interesting. So the rhythm is super important. So we do our allocations weekly. It just works better for our firm. In Profit First book, Mike Michalowicz wrote, he does it. He recommended on the every 2 weeks, and so 2 weeks is if it's your payrolls every 2 weeks, that seems to match up better with a 2-week payroll. Our payroll is every week, so it matches up better. But we're always going to have money in our payroll account because of the way we collect it. We're always ahead on our payroll account until the very end of the year. So it's a good way to track it by percentage versus the amount of money. So your balance is not what you're looking at. It's the percentage of your revenue, which is hard because people have been doing bank balance management of their business for so long. Oh, what's in my bank account? Oh, that means I can go buy something. When in reality, they couldn't afford it.
Right. And so there's, as you were saying, Steve, the weekly rhythm, right? Where it's like you make your allocations every week. And there's a Profit First bank, which we'll talk about in a little bit here, that has partnered with Profit First to where you can set up the allocations to happen automatically. It is a beautiful thing. We use it and it saves so much time on our allocations being made for us. So you could do it weekly, or you can do it twice a month. So it's the, you make the allocations on the 25th and the 10th. So you're doing it twice a month, and you're being intentional about moving that money into the accounts that you need. So that's why it's important to establish a rhythm. It's going to tell you, the ebbs and flow of your cash flow and your business needs. And it's also going to tell you if you're overspending in certain areas, so you can make those little tweaks. And one of the accounts that I see, with that overfunding is the tax account. And people are like, oh, there's all this money going into my tax account, and I really think we could use it for something else. And, that's where I'm like, okay, hold on. Have you made a quarterly tax payment yet? No. Okay. So we need to find out how much your quarterly tax payments are. Or as you're going through the year, your tax liability might go up as your business grows. So, having those conversations, I would say at least twice a year with your tax strategist or your CPA to say, hey, how much taxes does it look like I'm going to owe this year? And making sure you're not taking money out of that account. So we're always very strategic about it. There are accounts that get nice and fat, and they see that money and they're like, oh, I could use this for something else. And it's like, well, hold on, let's have a conversation about this. So those are some really good points.
Yeah, the tax account was definitely one that looks really, you're like, oh man, this is awesome. You're like, oh yeah, quarterlies. In Connecticut, we have to pay there's state income tax and then your federal quarterly. So you're like, oh, okay. And then after you make your payments and you're like, oh, that's about where it should be. And then it looks really great. And then same thing. So realizing that when we have an account that you're making like payments out of every like 90 days, don't let the bank balance fool you.
Yeah. So I want to take some time now to talk about the core accounts for Profit First and how they work. Because again, and we've talked a little bit about this, but again, this is an area where there's some confusion that comes into play. So we'll unpack like what their purpose is and, what their allocation is. Like what does the allocation serve? And what I mean by allocation, like how much, like with your percentage, where are you going to transfer it to what account?
So the first account we're going to start with is the income account. And that is collecting 100% of all revenue and income goes into the income account.
Yeah. Which again acts as your serving tray, which we were talking about earlier.
Yep. And then everything is transferred out of your income account. So basically with the rhythm, it works like this. All the money comes in for a week. And then for us, every Wednesday, the money gets transferred out of the income account and allocated to all of the accounts that it's going to go out of. So on Thursday, that income account is zero. So you're like, oh my gosh, where did my money go? Well, it's in all your allocated accounts. So then on Thursday, the first deposit on Thursday starts building up that income account again. Then the next Wednesday, it gets emptied because it's all being allocated to these following accounts.
Which is, again, the first one you make is profit, because what comes first is most important. So when you're doing your allocations, always do your profit allocation first. There's something rewarding about this. I actually tested this out for a while myself to see how it felt. And when I was doing my allocations into my different accounts, when I started off with the profit account, it felt really good and energizing. When I switched it around and I started off with other accounts and I started doing the profit allocation last, I was like, this is just not as much fun. Like I loved the idea of putting the profit away first. So the purpose is accumulating profit for the business and the owner for profit distributions when the owner is going to take their quarterly distribution, and also for a vault. So you can use your profit hold account as a vault until maybe you get large enough to where you start creating your own vault or a different vault to put money away in, which we do have clients where it's like they have their Profit First hold account that's built, and then they have mini vaults for different accounts to where they're like, oh, that's going to cover 1 or 2 months of materials or 1 or 2 months of equipment or 1 or 2 months of payroll or operating. or they just start doing an overall vault to where they say, okay, we're going to start with 1 month of expenses, and then we're going to move to 2 months and 3 months, which is everything. So you want to do a minimum of 1 to 15% of every deposit into your profit account. Some clients even do up to 20%. And we say 1%, and you may have heard us talk about this many times. It's the easiest way to get started if you are struggling in implementing profit first. Is we say just open your profit account and do 1% profit allocation. Move 1% of your income to this account and start there.
And then you run your business on the other 99%, right? And we can all figure out a way to run our business on the other 99%.
Right. So baby steps.
Yep. Next account is owner's compensation account. The purpose of that account is paying the business owner for their work. That can either be in a paycheck if you're an S Corp or C Corp, or in a draw check if you're an LLC or a single proprietor. The pay should be relative to what they do in the business, what you would be paying somebody else to do your job if you had to hire someone. So a couple of different situations, we see extremes of that. People working part-time in a business, taking an extraordinary amount out of the business and wondering why it doesn't work. And then on the other hand, where they're really working 60 or 70 hours in the business, and they would be paying somebody, $25 an hour for that, and they're taking a very minimum wage. So they're not actually being compensated appropriately. And that typically is for a number of reasons. But we want to make sure that we're paying the owner a reasonable compensation for the job they're doing in the business.
Yeah. And I call it the market rate. So people go, well, what should I pay myself? And I said, well, what is your role? Like for me at Core, my role is CEO. So I look at, well, what is an amount that I should get paid that's comparable to the market rate? Like, what would I hire somebody else with my business size and these responsibilities in the area that I live in, and what would I pay them? So that is what I look at, every year. Should I get paid this much? Is this comparable to the market? And also, how many hours am I working in the business? So if I were to cut my hours down to 50%, I couldn't collect 100% of what I would pay somebody else. Sure, I could take profit distributions if my company is big enough and supports that, but I would lower my pay, my owner's compensation percentage down to what's comparable. And the allocation for this is typically about 5 to 50% of every deposit, depending on your revenue level.
And I just looked up when you were saying that you can look up and find out in salary right online, how much so if you're running a mowing crew, you can find out what does that mowing foreman get paid nationally and also in your market, because it can vary widely from New York to, say, Mississippi, just because, the taxes are crazy in New York. So people make more money. But and also, what you would be paying other people in your company. If you do sales, what does a salesperson get paid? What does the CEO get paid? So you want to make sure that for the work that you're doing and the amount of hours that you're working, that you're getting paid appropriately. Otherwise, it can throw all your pricing and percentages off. You're like, well, I'm only taking this amount. And really, it means the truth is that your pricing is too low, and that's why you're taking it. Or you have too much spent on your equipment, and that's why you're taking it. Or you have too many people on crews, and you're paying people, too much in overtime or inefficient labor, and that's why you're only taking that pay. All right, the next account is a tax account, and the purpose of the tax account is for income, taxes for the business, and for the owner. And this could be state and federal income tax.
Yep. And it does not include sales tax, which we talked about earlier. It is going to include, and it also does not include the employee payroll tax. So the taxes that you are paying out as a business to your employees, so the employer's taxes for the employees, it does not include that. So don't include that in there. And it also does not include property tax. It strictly is there to serve the income taxes for the business and the owner. So it's whether you're filing to where, you're liable for the taxes for the business, then state and federal you would pay it through this account. If you're on payroll, it's also going to be your payroll taxes. So whatever you are paying for your payroll taxes as an employee of your business, if you're an S Corp or a C Corp, it will come out of this account too. Not all employees, just you as the business owner. So what is that amount that you see on your paycheck? And the allocation percentage of this is 5 to 15% of every deposit. And I say as low as 5% as the company may be in a startup phase or a growth phase and not have that much tax liability. So your prior year tax liability can indicate what your tax percentage should be. So that's a really good rule of thumb. If you're working with a professional tax strategist or CPA, I would get their feedback on what your estimated liability is going to be for that year and make those adjustments year to year, sometimes quarter to quarter. Sometimes you need to adjust that percentage mid-year because you're making a lot more money, you're being more efficient, and you're going to have more profit. So let the business pay the taxes for you.
And then the next account is operating expense account, also known as OPEX, aka OPEX, operating expense account. And the purpose of this is to cover all business expenses. With the basic profit first account, you would pay payroll, materials, operation expenses from this account.
Yes.
And it's going to be between 30 and 65% of every deposit.
And again, that's based on your revenue tier. So look in the book and see where you're at with your revenue tier and what percentage you should be allocating to those accounts. And you may find when you implement Profit First that you're not in that 30 to 65% for your revenue tier. You may find like, oh my goodness, I'm at 80% of our operating expenses. That's okay. Because what you're going to do is when you're aware now, you could do something about it. And you're going to start making changes to get you to that right percentage. So you don't freak out. It's very common. You know, it means that you can right your ship and get there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the book she's referring to is Profit First for Lawn Care and Landscape Businesses by Christine Era.
So how do you get started with Profit First? So I would suggest take the instant assessment to identify where you're at. So what are your allocation percentages? So there's two that you're going to find. You're going to find what are your current allocation percentages, right? That's what it's going to tell you. Where are you at now? And then what are your target allocation percentages? Where do you need to be? So that's the gap I was saying that you can correct. So start with your instant assessment. We are going to include a link in the show notes for a free instant assessment in our Profit First toolbox. So please go there. The next step is to open up your 5 bank accounts, which we said that we would share which bank is really great, because one of the problems that we've had in setting up Profit First is every bank wants to charge you for every account. And then they say, oh, and you have to keep a minimum in there. Well, Profit First has done a really great job, Mike and his team over at, we call it Profit First HQ, so headquarters. They've done a really great job on trying to find partnerships with other businesses that really support the process and the system. And they created a relationship with a bank called Relay Bank. And it's an online and money management platform that will allow you to set up your allocations with every account. So moving it from the income account. So it allows this automated system to be created just by adding your accounts and saying, hey, this is my Profit First rhythm. So the Profit First system couldn't get easier by using this bank. They also don't charge you fees for every account that you have. I believe you can have up to like 25 accounts. So you can go, Profit First crazy with your allocations if you want to. And we will include a link to Relay Bank in the show notes as well.
Awesome. Yeah, Relay Bank has been very nice to work with.
Yeah, they've been fantastic. And the last step that you need to do is identify your rhythm. So you take your instant assessment, you set up your bank accounts, and now it's time to identify your rhythm. So is that rhythm going to be weekly, or is it going to be on the 10th and 25th of every month? So it really depends on your business needs. I always like starting businesses out on a weekly rhythm when they start implementing profit first, because it puts the cash there in the accounts sooner, and it allows us to identify the pinch points and make those changes if we're on a weekly rhythm, and identifying where can the company not support itself.
Yeah, we find weekly was definitely easier for us. Every 2 weeks it just was difficult. Now we could do it because our accounts are fully funded. But in the beginning, to build them up and to really fund them, it would have been really difficult to do a biweekly. So I would encourage the weekly when you're starting. All right. Well, that was today's basic for profit first for lawn care and landscape businesses, or actually, any business really. It's the same basic formula. Christine has broken out all the percentages in the book, Profit First for Lawn Care and Landscape Businesses, based on your revenue level. But this is a great start. Like I said, Profit First it's simple, but it's not easy. And, if you need help, you can reach out to us. You can email us. There's going to be information in the show notes. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And we look forward to you joining us on the next podcast. Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast,
the show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.